I've always dreamed of being at the back of a rock concert downing beers. I've always dreamed of being that cool guy. But nothing doing. I'm just a loser who loves Schweppes and Schubert. So Jeanne missed the incredible 8-minute version of A Forest. Robert Smith loved to draw out this trippy song, which had been their first hit in the British charts. It started to rain heavily, and the two of them took refuge in a taxi heading for the centre of London, where John lived in a tiny flat he had inherited from his grandmother. Before she died, she had told him, "I'll leave you the flat on one condition, that you water the flowers on my grave once a week." The honouring of an open-ended contract between the living and the dead is admittedly somewhat unusual, but perhaps this was another example of British humour. Anyway, the deal was done, and the grandson never broke his promise. But let's return to the living. That night, Jeanne decided to go up to John's flat, which was quite unlike her. They deemed it sensible to undress, so as not to stay in their soaking wet clothes. Once they were naked, facing one another, they had no choice but to have sex. Early next morning, John suggested they go to the cemetery. He had to pay his dues. Jeanne thought this idea for their first walk utterly charming. They strolled for hours, in the first throes of love. Neither of them imagined that, 15 years later, it would all come crashing down. Chapter 2. They loved that their names were John and Jeanne. They spent hours telling each other stories, all the pages of their pasts. At the start of a relationship, the beloved is a Russian novel, long, deep, and wild. They discovered they had a lot in common, literature, for example. They both loved Nabokov and vowed one day to go butterfly catching in his honour. At that time, Margaret Thatcher was brutally ignoring the demands and stifling the hopes of the striking miners. Neither of them cared. Happiness doesn't trouble itself with the conditions of the working class. Happiness is always a little bourgeois. John was at art college, but his true passion was inventing. His latest creation was the umbrella tie, an object that would surely become indispensable for every British person. Though the idea was brilliant, it had nonetheless hit a wall of general disinterest. Clock pens were still all the rage. Jeanne told him over and over that all geniuses experience rejection to begin with. He had to give the world time to catch up with his talent, she added loftily and with affection. For her part, Jeanne had fled to London to escape her parents, who had never known how to express their love. She already spoke perfect English. She dreamed of becoming a political journalist, interviewing heads of state, although she didn't really know where this obsession had come from. 8 years later, she would put a question to François Mitterrand at a press conference in Paris. In her eyes, this would mark the start of her success. First, she quit her job as a nanny to become a waitress in a restaurant whose speciality was an excellent chili. She quickly worked out that she had only to speak with a strong French accent to earn bigger tips. Day after day, she perfected the art of riddling her English with mistakes. She liked it when John watched her from the street, waiting for the end of her shift. Then, when she finally left work, they would walk through the night. She would tell him about some rude customers she'd had, and he would enthusiastically explain his latest idea to her. Between them, there was a harmony that was part dream, part reality. After several months of hoarding her tips, Jeanne decided she had saved up enough to leave her job. She wrote a magnificent covering letter, which landed her an internship with The Guardian. As she was French, they asked her to assist the newspaper's Paris correspondent. This was a blow. She had hoped for an exciting life, running around, reporting here and there, but her role consisted of organising meetings and booking train tickets. It was ironic, but being a waitress had felt more intellectually stimulating. Luckily, the situation improved. Through sheer determination, she showed what she was capable of and was soon given more responsibility. She even published her first article. In a couple of lines, she described the advent of soup kitchens in France. John read and reread these few words as though it was a sacred text. It was an incredible feeling, seeing the name of the woman he loved in the newspaper, or rather, her initials, J.G. Her last name was Goddard, though no relation.